Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I am your host, Smooth Caramel, and I talk about rap. So that's what I'm gonna do. Do y'all remember the time that you first heard a song and it just felt real? It didn't feel fantastic, it didn't feel hyperbolic, it didn't feel cinematic, wasn't trying to invoke the strongest of emotional reactions, just real. Now, there's obviously nothing wrong for songs trying to be any or all of those things. Different types of music have differing uses and times to listen to them. But when it comes to songs that have an almost humble level of realness to them, it can end up being quite calming and then more engaging because of it. The first time I can remember having that kind of reaction to a song was one called I Can't Wait by Sleepy Brown featuring Andre 3000. It actually starts off with an intro which is by a string quartet, which ends up feeling quite soothing and almost even uplifting, at least in the album version. And the main song starts with Andre 3000. He comes in with a very mellow first verse that has actually stayed with me for all these years, really, since I first heard it. It takes me on a journey every time I listen to it, and it brings so many images and memories with its very grounded level of depiction and overall relatability. He's describing an association with somebody he shares some kind of romantic relationship, and it's very muted and focused on the smaller details, those which you tend to do when you're in a romantic relationship of any kind, which is what makes it so relatable because everybody has had some kind of association like that. And even if they haven't, then they could relatively easily imagine being in that through witnessing that type of relationship between so many people or varying types of fiction that exist and that people consume very often. So with that opening verse being so relatable, it primed me very much for the arrival of the main artist of this song, Sleepy Brown. And the thing that stands out to me with this is that it's not a rap song, but it's very much enhanced by that inclusion of a rapper. And thus comes this video's topic of discussion. Today I'm going into a trope of rap that I love immensely. That of course is, as the title suggests, the guest rapper. But that is a vaguely defined term at best. What I'm referring to primarily is when a non-rap song has an entry from a singular rapper on a small portion of that song. It's usually a first and or last verse to add that musical variety to whatever type of a song is being produced overall. No doubt the ability to cross-promote across genres being an inarguable motivation for this type of endeavor. The rap genre now being one of the juggernauts of popular music, it means that rap has become a market that's too large and lucrative a realm to be ignored entirely, especially for very long. Plus, rap is inherently a very versatile medium of music, so you can actually have this type of a genre combination without having to compromise the creative vision or musical intent very much. Obviously, this can be done poorly. I'd say that more often than not it is. But when it's done well, it is a powerful device to deploy. In my opinion, this is best achieved in a song that is very much rooted in the non-rap genre that's being worked with a singular verse from a rapper. This is for that stylistic juxtaposition to arrive in the most pronounced way possible with the inclusion and combination of a rapper in this genre that otherwise wouldn't include rap. This allows the skills and features on display to be accentuated by that contrast, particularly in conjunction with the main genre at work. It's like that final touch of spices or garnish on an already well prepared dish. Not the main flavors to be processed, but a somewhat separate element to enhance your overall appreciation of the complete plate. Yes, I know, another cooking analogy. I'm just working with what I know, okay? Outside of rap music, that seems to be only food or anime. With that said, the effects of this tend to be understated for me. The most fundamental effects that this tends to achieve work because of two main factors: contrast and novelty. One way this can work is by the fact that rap is, like I've said before, quite a grounded and potentially more intimate genre of music, and thus can reduce the scale of the companion genre, something like pop or rock or R&B, funk, whatever it may be. It can add some grounding and realism to the louder, more fantastical genre that it's working with, the more muted component to the otherwise more grandiose body of music. An example that comes to mind for me is a song called Glorious by Sudan Archives. The short rap verse grounds the track and subsequently elevates the singer on the rest of it through that contrast in the more understated rap verse and the more larger and grandiose body of her singing, and the production that surrounds her versus that of him, the rapper. This is particularly done well with the solid and understandable verse that he drops, the flows being very accessible but working nicely with the beat without demanding too much attention. It draws enough for you to enjoy the verse without drawing focus from the main artist on the track. And the short duration allows it to not overstay its welcome, taking on that role of simply serving the song. So in this example, the reduced placement and concoction with this rapper allows him to serve a somewhat supplementary or supporting role within the entire song, often the case when the rapper is on the first or second verse. Well, just not the last verse. In contrast, a guest rapper can also fulfill the more opposite role of increasing the drama or intensity of an otherwise more muted contributing genre, acting as a more punctuating inclusion after having been preceded by this more muted combination genre that we're working with. You know, that set the stage, so to speak. Nicki Minaj fulfills this role well in a song called Somebody Else by Mario. Her verse of rap increases the intensity and the rawness of the otherwise softer song that's depicted. She uses more accusatory statements and an overall more aggressive tone and delivery. This contrasts especially strongly after Mario's first two verses, where his inclusion has more feelings of pain and confusion. No rhyme intended. Singing is inherently softer and more refined, and this contrasts greatly against rap, which is more coarse and oblique. Obviously, that is generally for both. But it means in a song like this contrast can be introduced and exploited without the song having to compromise that organic sound, which is why it's such a commonly used device. Though, like I said, it doesn't always work as well as that. The first examples that actually come to mind for me are both Katy Perry songs, but the less said about those, the better. I don't feel like I need to force myself to give any analysis to those. No. You'd have to pay me to analyze those even a little bit. My ears deserve better than that. Not that I particularly dislike Katy Perry, but just those songs I cannot stand. But moving on. Just outside the poppiest of pop examples, you have Beyonce and Jay-Z when they work together or have worked together in the past. Because they've had at least a few collaborations that really didn't hit for me. I'm of the camp that prefers their solo works more than their combined efforts. But that could just be because I prefer their earlier works in general, at which point they wouldn't have actually collaborated that much. Correlation does not equal causation, kids. Two examples I could give would be Drunk in Love and Upgrade You, both of which are songs that I can enjoy. Often played at parties I'd be at in those 2010s, but if I were on the musical selections, as I often slyly position myself into being, then they would both be one or two verse joints that moved on before the arrival of Jay-Z's verses. The reason pretty much being the same for both. The inherent contrast for these types of combinations felt more conflicting as opposed to complementary. Instead of building on or from the vibes and the textures that are established by Beyonce, they interrupt them or even arguably take away from them. The beat even changes to accommodate Jay-Z in a way that I would say is far from seamless. Drunken Love was the worst case in my opinion. The production is very loose, airy, inviting, which I would say successfully portrays the sensations of having some level of intoxication while experiencing those romantic feelings. Which is why I think the song is particularly successful at parties when you might be riding that drunken wave. But then we'd lose the majority of that production for the arrival of Jay-Z on his verse. It moves to a more boom boom tap backdrop that's most suited for rap verses. And this verse ends up being quite off topic and unfocused. He uses quite a rigid and fractured flow which kind of works directly against that looser, more airy texture that the song established. And then it comes to a head with an extremely labored handoff back to Beyonce on the chorus, leaving this hip-hop enthusiast wondering if I was still listening to the same song. You know, thinking about it, I actually had identical criticisms to Jay-Z on Timberlake's song Suit and Tie. Must have been around a similar time actually. Hold up. Same damn year. Maybe 2013 was a particularly off year for Jay-Z and his taking up the mantle of a guest rapper. But I digress. Hopefully that was sufficient to make my point for how this trope can be less successful. I didn't even mean to go on as long as I did there, but sometimes when I write these or I film them, I'm reminded of these criticisms that I've had for so long that nobody really gave me the time of day to complain about. Another reason why I started this channel. And then before I know it, they're flooding out of me. I had to express myself somehow. That said, it's time for some more positives with the more obscure. Feels like a hot minute since I've done one as well. The first one will be a song by Kriston Gray featuring Jay Givens, Wanna. It's a very funky and immersive song. I really enjoy just bopping along to it. It's got a very strong, simple, and easily recognizable hook, and it's quite infectious as that. I would particularly give mention to Jay Givens on that track because he embodies pretty much everything that I enjoy about the guest rapper on his verse, with his flows that are fluid and interchanging with the stresses of the beat, and it doesn't allow you to become bored because he moves it so nicely yet so seamlessly, staying pretty firmly on point as well, so when you're focused on his verse, you're brought more into it with that. Second pick, Sam Henshaw, Wretch 32, Doubt. Probably the first UK music I've mentioned on this channel now. But it's just a nice and uplifting song, some very needed optimism for the times. Brief, clear, simple, very enjoyable listen. Last choice will be Eric Robertson, or Eric Robertson, not Eric Robertson, as most people make the mistake, including me, for about 3 years when I actually searched for his albums after listening to them with my dad. But yes, Eric Robertson featuring T3 from Slum Village. But it's a very airy, soft, soothing song, simply about the desire to take a relationship further. And the singular desire presented in the song works well with that simplicity. It's actually quite moving as far as I've experienced with it. Even as a rap verse, it doesn't feel as rigid as rap verses can come across because of the light delivery from T3. So yeah, check that out if you haven't. Otherwise, I'ma leave it there. Anyway, peace, love, all that goodness. This has been another Smooth Caramel production. Peace.